When Bruce Catton first opened the military reports on the Battle of Chattanooga in 1863, stored for decades in the National Archives, he never imagined that those yellowed pages would reveal the most explosive secret about Ulysses S. Grant's military genius. For 30 years, Catton had studied every battle, every decision, every moment of the Civil War. But it wasn't until he held that report dated November 23, 1863, a document of just 6 pages describing a meeting that lasted exactly 1 hour, that his life as a historian changed forever. What Catton discovered in those pages wasn't just another battle. It was definitive proof that Grant possessed something no general in American military history had ever demonstrated before: the ability to create a completely new command method in just 60 minutes of extreme pressure. And it all happened in exactly 1 hour that not only defined the fate of Chattanooga, but revealed the DNA of leadership that would forever change American warfare. This discovery would revolutionize not only military history, but our understanding of what happens when a genius is forced to improvise under total pressure. Bruce Catton was never just a historian. He was an obsessive Civil War detective. For decades, he had pursued a question that kept him up at night: what really made Grant different from all the other Union generals who had failed before him? Catton realized that until that point, all scholars of Grant had focused on the great victories: Vicksburg, the Virginia campaign, Appomattox. But then he understood something revolutionary. Great revelations about military genius don't happen in moments of planned triumph. They happen when a leader is thrown into an impossible situation and has only minutes to create a solution. For years, Catton had followed in the footsteps of other historians, analyzing the same famous battles, the same well-known documents. He knew he was missing something crucial, something that would explain why Grant succeeded where McClellan, Hooker, Burnside, and all the others failed to achieve. Catton's obsession began when he was young and read about how Grant had arrived in Chattanooga in October 1863 and found a nightmare: 40,000 Union soldiers under siege, surrounded by veteran Confederate generals on the mountains, without supplies, without hope. Every previous general would have evacuated. Grant did something different. Catton's journey through the military archives on Chattanooga had stretched for more than a decade. He had examined hundreds of battle reports, correspondences, and soldiers' diaries. Each visit to the National Archives was a new hope of finding the exact moment when Grant transformed from a competent general into something extraordinary. In 1955, he almost gave up. He had spent months analyzing reports on the battles of Lookout Mountain and Missionary Ridge, but they all told the same superficial story: Grant attacked and won. In 1957, a discovery about Sherman's tactics temporarily excited him, but he soon realized it was just more of the same. It was in March 1958 when Catton discovered that forgotten military report. He had spent the entire day in the archives, his hands dirty with dust, his eyes tired, when something about a poorly catalogued document magnetically attracted his attention. The document was lost among supply reports and administrative correspondence. But the header made his heart pound: Command Meeting, Chattanooga, November 23, 1863, 2 p.m. to 3 p.m., Coordinated Attack Method. Catton read that line and felt a shiver. 1 hour. In his entire career, he had never found such a specific account of such a brief military meeting. Most documents spoke of days of planning, weeks of preparation. But this one spoke of 60 precise minutes where Grant created something revolutionary. That night, Catton couldn't sleep. He knew he had found the moment when Grant became Grant. During his research, Catton realized that 1 hour at Grant's headquarters on November 23, 1863, was not just another military meeting. It was the exact moment when Grant invented a command method that no general in American history had ever tried before. To understand what Catton discovered, we need to go back to that November 1863. The situation in Chattanooga was a military nightmare. The veteran Confederate General Braxton Bragg occupied the impenetrable heights of Missionary Ridge and Lookout Mountain with 40,000 experienced men. The Union Army was under siege, with starving soldiers eating half rations. It was the perfect situation to evacuate, exactly as any military manual would recommend. Chattanooga was lost. Every competent general would save what he could and retreat to Nashville. But Catton discovered that at 2 p.m. on November 23rd, Grant convened an extraordinary meeting. Present were Sherman, Thomas, Hooker. generals who had commanded entire armies, men with decades of military experience. What Grant did in that room changed everything. Catton discovered the exact document where Grant presented his coordinated attack method, something he had invented that same morning while observing enemy positions. It was revolutionary. Instead of attacking Bragg's strong point, as every military manual taught, Grant proposed to attack 3 different points simultaneously, forcing Bragg to divide his veteran forces. Sherman would attack the right flank, Thomas the center, Hooker the left flank. "But General," questioned Sherman according to the report Catton held in his hands, "this has never been tried before. How do we coordinate 3 simultaneous attacks without direct communication?" It was at that moment that Grant revealed the most brilliant part of his method. Catton discovered that Grant had created a system of visual signals using bonfires and flags that would allow the 3 attacks to be coordinated even with the mountains blocking direct communication. In 60 minutes, Grant had invented what the military today calls distributed command, a concept that would only be formalized 100 years later in World War II. Catton realized that that meeting wasn't just about tactics. Grant was betting everything on a completely new philosophy, that a well-planned, coordinated attack could overcome any defensive advantage, even when executed by an army at a disadvantage. Most impressive, Grant gave Sherman, Thomas, and Hooker just 24 hours to prepare their men. Veteran generals who were used to weeks of planning had to execute a never-before-tested method in less than a day. "If it works," Grant said, according to the document, "we will have created a new way of making war. If it doesn't work, at least we tried something Bragg will never expect." Catton never imagined that discovery would lead him to completely rewrite his understanding of military genius. That 1 hour at Grant's headquarters wasn't about courage or determination. It was about the ability to innovate under extreme pressure. It was 3 a.m. when Bruce Catton finally grasped the true meaning of that meeting. He was at his desk, surrounded by hundreds of documents about Chattanooga, when the epiphany hit him like a lightning bolt. Grant had not just planned an attack. He had completely revolutionized the concept of modern military command. Catton realized that in that 1 hour, Grant demonstrated that true military geniuses don't follow manuals. They write new manuals in real time. Catton discovered something even more extraordinary in the diaries of the generals present at the meeting. Sherman wrote that night, "Grant presented a method today that I had never considered. If it works, it will change how we think about war." Thomas, the veteran of the Mexican War, noted, "In 30 years of military career, I have never seen a general create a completely new strategy in a single afternoon. Grant doesn't think like others think." Hooker, who had commanded the Army of the Potomac, was even more direct. "Either Grant is a genius or he is insane. We'll find out tomorrow." It was at that moment in Catton's career that he understood the deepest truth about Grant. Great military leaders are not born knowing everything. They develop the ability to invent impossible solutions when all conventional solutions have failed. Catton's discovery began to connect points no one had seen before. That 1 hour in Chattanooga explained everything that came after. The Wilderness Campaign, Cold Harbor, Petersburg, even Appomattox. Grant had developed a command method based on instantaneous innovation under pressure. When Catton began to share his discovery with other military historians, the reaction was one of total shock. Colleagues who had studied Grant for decades realized they had missed the most defining moment of his entire evolution as a commander. "I spent 20 years thinking Grant was just stubborn and lucky," admitted a Catton colleague. "But you proved he was a military innovator operating on another level of strategic thinking." Most impressive. When Catton researched what happened in the following days, he discovered that the method worked perfectly. On November 25th, Sherman, Thomas, and Hooker executed their coordinated attacks using Grant's visual signals. Bragg, confused by the impossible coordination, saw his veteran lines collapse in a matter of hours. Catton had discovered that Grant did not win Chattanooga by brute force. He won because in 1 hour he created a method that turned 3 competent generals into a coordinated war machine that Braxton Bragg, with all his experience, could neither understand nor combat. Catton's discovery about Grant's 1 hour faced initial skepticism from the historical community. How could such a brief meeting have created such a revolutionary military method? Catton knew he needed more evidence. He returned to the archives with a new purpose. This time, he wasn't just looking for Grant. He was looking for the reflections of that method in all subsequent campaigns. What he found completely validated his theory. Catton discovered that Grant used variations of the same method in all his later victories. In the Wilderness Campaign, he coordinated multiple simultaneous attacks. At Cold Harbor, he applied the same principle of distributed attacks. Even at Appomattox, the final strategy was based on the method created in Chattanooga. Even more impressive were the Confederate documents Catton found. Braxton Bragg had written a detailed report after the defeat in Chattanooga where he admitted, "Grant employed a command method that I do not recognize from any military manual. His attacks were coordinated in a way I had never witnessed." Robert E. Lee, in private correspondence discovered by Catton, wrote about Grant after Virginia. This general possesses a unique understanding of coordinated command. He transforms multiple forces into a single military will. The most impressive evidence came from the post-war military manuals themselves. Catton discovered that after 1865, American military academies began teaching distributed command methods based directly on Grant's innovations in Chattanooga. West Point created an entire course called Coordination of Multiple Forces that used the Battle of Chattanooga as the primary example. Cadets specifically studied that one-hour meeting where Grant created the method. Catton had discovered that Grant had not only won a battle, he had created a new paradigm of military leadership that would be studied for generations. When Catton finally presented his discovery about Grant's 1 hour in Chattanooga, the military historical community was stunned. Historians who had studied Grant for decades realized they had missed the most innovative moment of his entire career. "I spent 30 years looking for Grant's secret in the major campaigns," Catton admitted years later. But the real Grant was hidden in 1 hour of pure genius that everyone considered just another military meeting. That discovery transformed not only Catton's career, but all modern understanding of military innovation. He had proven that moments of genius don't happen in laboratories or study rooms. They happen when exceptional leaders are pushed to the absolute limit. Today, in military academies around the world, that 1 hour of Grant is studied as the perfect example of innovation under extreme pressure. Catton had discovered that Grant was not just a determined general. He was a military innovator who created impossible solutions in real time. Executives, business leaders, strategists, everyone studies that moment when Grant created a completely new method in 60 minutes of total pressure. The lesson transcended warfare: how to turn extreme pressure into revolutionary innovation. Catton spent the rest of his career exploring the implications of that discovery. He had found definitive proof that Grant did not win by brute force. He won by developing a completely new way of thinking about coordinated leadership. Catton visited the exact location of that headquarters in Chattanooga dozens of times after his discovery. He used to stand in the room where Grant had created his revolutionary method, trying to feel the pressure the general had felt in that crucial 1 hour. Grant was not a traditional military genius, Catton wrote in his memoirs. He was something much rarer, a man who had discovered how to turn extreme pressure into instantaneous innovation. That 6-page report that Catton discovered in 1958 is still preserved in the National Archives, but its true importance is not on the paper. It is in the lesson Catton extracted from it, that true leaders are not defined by what they know, but by the speed with which they create solutions when nothing they know works anymore. Grant created a revolutionary method in 1 hour. Catton proved he was a genius by discovering that 1 hour. And us, we have the opportunity to apply this transformative lesson when we are pushed to our absolute limit. Because we all have our 1 hour coming, the question is, when it arrives, will you follow the manual like everyone else, or will you create a completely new method like Grant? If Bruce Catton's obsessive journey through military genius has touched you as much as it has touched millions of students of leadership around the world, subscribe to the channel to discover more explosive revelations about how exceptional minds operate under extreme pressure. And tell us in the comments, what was your 1 hour that defined how you think and led?